in the quiet town of Red Maple. 8-year-old Luna Whitlock has never seen the sunrise, but she can feel its warmth. Born blind, Luna dreams of freedom, stepping beyond her parents' constant watch. Everything changes the day Shadow arrives. A retired K-9 dog scarred by tragedy. But when danger threatens their small town, can a girl who sees without eyes and a dog afraid of losing again truly become heroes? What would you do if darkness was your only friend? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit subscribe for this unforgettable journey. The small town of Red Maple, Montana, lay nestled within sprawling valleys and dense forests that danced vibrantly beneath autumn's golden cloak. It was the kind of town where folks greeted each other warmly at the general store and doors remained unlocked at night. At least, that's how things used to be. Now, uncertainty hovered over the quaint streets, invisible yet palpable, carried by whispers of mysterious break-ins that had disturbed their peace. In a modest farmhouse on the outskirts of town, 8-year-old Luna Whitlock sat quietly by a large bay window, her slender fingers tracing gentle circles on the glass pane. Her clouded, pale blue eyes gazed unseeing out toward the waving branches of the towering maple trees. Luna's fine blonde hair cascaded gently down her back, catching afternoon sunlight that streamed warmly through the window, illuminating her delicate, thoughtful face. Though she had never seen the colors that filled her world, Luna felt them. She felt them in the gentle rustle of leaves, in the scent of fresh pine, and in the warm whisper of wind against her skin. "Luna, dear, don't lean too far forward," came the ever-cautious voice of Cynthia Whitlock, Luna's mother. Cynthia was a petite woman with delicate features, her face often wearing a mask of quiet anxiety. She had auburn hair neatly pinned back into a bun, a careful choice that mirrored her precise and cautious personality. Cynthia had always been protective, her heart twisted by constant worry since the day Luna was born blind. Her gentle brown eyes, now creased with fine lines from years of stress, constantly scanned her daughter for any signs of harm. "I'm all right, Mom," Luna replied softly, withdrawing her hand from the window and clasping her fingers together in her lap. Luna loved her mother deeply, but she longed desperately to experience life beyond these protective walls. Her father, John Whitlock, understood her longing in ways Cynthia seemed incapable of. John, tall and strong-shouldered, bore the rugged features of a man accustomed to hard labor. His quiet strength and patient nature provided Luna with comfort and a sense of calm amidst her mother's hovering fears. That afternoon, as Luna remained perched by her favorite spot near the window, she heard the familiar sound of her father's worn boots crunching softly across gravel toward the front porch. The sound was comforting, grounding her to a reality she longed to explore independently. Today, however, something was different. Another set of footsteps accompanied her father's familiar gait, for rhythmic paws padding cautiously, hesitantly. Luna's heart quickened with curiosity. Her ears strained eagerly as the door creaked open, a rush of cool autumn air sweeping inside. Her father's deep, reassuring voice filled the room. "Luna, Cynthia, there's someone I'd like you both to meet," John announced gently, ushering in the newcomer. Luna instinctively sat straighter, her senses alert. She heard the soft panting of a dog, felt the heavy, hesitant presence as the animal approached slowly. She extended a hand cautiously, fingertips reaching outward in silent invitation. "This is Shadow," John explained quietly. "He's a retired K-9, served bravely with the police department. His handler passed away in action, and Shadow was injured during the mission. They say he's quiet now. He doesn't respond much, but I thought perhaps he might find peace here with us." Shadow stood silently near the doorway, the majestic German shepherd casting an imposing shadow even in his withdrawn state. His fur was a mixture of rich sable and midnight black, but the shine had dulled with neglect and sorrow. Once powerful muscles were visible beneath a coat that bore faded scars, echoes of his bravery. Yet it was his deep amber eyes, eyes that now gazed at nothing with a profound sadness that conveyed his true tale. Cynthia moved cautiously, uncertain, but Luna stood and approached, fearlessly drawn by an invisible thread of shared silence. She reached gently for Shadow, sensing his uncertainty mirrored her own hidden longing. Her small fingers found the fur around his neck, soft and thick, feeling the strong pulse beneath his skin. For a moment, neither moved. "Welcome home, Shadow," Luna whispered softly, a delicate smile forming across her lips. Shadow remained motionless, the slightest twitch of his ears the only sign he'd heard her. Yet Luna felt a shift within him, subtle but real. Across town, in a small but orderly office at the Red Maple Police Station, Sheriff Earl Benson studied a collection of photographs pinned carefully to a board. Earl was a robust man in his late 50s, with silver streak hair neatly combed back and sharp blue eyes narrowed with suspicion. Known for his stern yet fair demeanor, Earl had served Red Maple for decades, becoming a familiar and trusted figure. Now his broad fingers tapped slowly against the desk, considering the strange incidents that disturbed his normally peaceful jurisdiction. Each photo depicted signs of intrusion: forced doors, trampled gardens, and muddy boot prints. Something felt wrong, far more troubling than simple mischief. A new darkness had crept into his quiet town, and he was determined to expose it. Back at the Whitlock home, nightfall brought colder winds whispering through the trees, rattling leaves and gently shaking window frames. Luna lay awake in her small bed, listening to the sounds of the night, comforting, familiar. Tonight, however, a new sound emerged from the room across the hall, a low, sorrowful whine that tugged painfully at her heart. She slid from beneath her blankets and carefully moved toward the source of the sound, navigating the darkness effortlessly, guided by memory and instinct. The door creaked open quietly, and Luna knelt beside Shadow, who lay curled up on the floor, restless and unsettled. "You miss your friend, don't you?" Luna whispered gently, reaching out to stroke the dog's trembling flank. Shadow startled slightly at her touch, but quickly relaxed, letting Luna's calm presence soothe him. For the first time since arriving, Shadow lowered his head onto Luna's lap, breathing a deep sigh of surrender. In that quiet room, beneath the watchful gaze of moonlight filtering softly through half-open blinds, Luna felt an unexpected warmth bloom within her chest. A connection, unspoken and profound, had formed between the little girl who saw without eyes and the dog who listened without words. Outside, wind rustled gently through the red maple leaves, whispering secrets only the night could hear. The farmhouse stood quietly, bathed in moonlight, seemingly unaware of the storm gathering silently around the edges of the peaceful town. Days in red maple passed gently, carried along by the whispers of autumn that wrapped around the town like a comforting shawl. At the Whitlock farm, morning sunlight streamed through pale curtains, painting patterns of soft gold across the floorboards of Luna's bedroom. Luna sat cross-legged on a thick woven rug, a large book resting in her lap. Her fingertips moved rhythmically over the raised dots of a braille page, but her attention drifted toward Shadow, who lay curled at the far corner, silent and indifferent. Luna's persistence was soft, patient as a summer breeze, yet beneath her gentle exterior was a resolute determination. Every day since Shadow had arrived, Luna would find a moment to approach him, always careful, always gentle, whispering softly stories of worlds only she knew. And every day, Shadow remained withdrawn, distant, a shadow indeed, hiding away from contact. Today, Luna closed her book decisively. "Maybe you're waiting for the right story," she murmured softly, turning her sightless eyes toward him, feeling his presence acutely even across the room. Shadow remained still, his broad chest rising and falling slowly. Luna could sense the weight of his sadness, an unspoken grief heavier than anything she'd felt before. It mirrored the heaviness in her own heart, the quiet ache of being treated as fragile, constantly protected, never truly free. Downstairs, Cynthia moved quietly through the kitchen, anxiety evident in every controlled movement as she prepared breakfast. Her slender figure appeared more frail today, her shoulders hunched slightly forward beneath her lavender cardigan. Auburn hair pulled tightly back, revealing worry lines more prominently etched around her eyes. She constantly glanced upward, as though her vigilance alone could shield Luna from harm. At the kitchen table, John sipped black coffee, watching his wife carefully. John's eyes were gentle but troubled. His rugged face, lined from years of labor, was deeply thoughtful. "Cynthia," he began softly, "you have to let Luna breathe a little more. Give her some space." Cynthia's lips pressed together tightly, eyes flashing briefly with frustration. "I wish it were that easy, John," she replied, voice thin with tension. "But you don't feel what I feel every time she's out of my sight. Anything could happen. She's stronger than you think," John said gently, setting down his mug. Cynthia only shook her head slightly, dismissively turning back to the stove. John sighed, understanding the depth of Cynthia's fears rooted deeply in the trauma of Luna's birth. He wished he could ease the burden she carried, but knew only Luna could truly teach Cynthia to trust again. Across town at the Red Maple police station, Sheriff Earl Benson stood outside, the collar of his dark green jacket turned up against the brisk autumn wind. Beside him was Deputy Frank Morris, a younger officer with sandy hair and earnest green eyes that seemed perpetually worried. Frank was slender, meticulous about his uniform, his earnestness tempered by his constant anxiety to do everything right. "Another sighting?" Earl asked gruffly, staring down at the fresh tire tracks cutting across the muddy ground near the town's edge. Frank nodded anxiously, pointing toward an abandoned hunting cabin obscured by thick pines. "Witness says it's an older, rusted pickup. Seen 3 times this week alone," Frank explained nervously, shifting his weight from one foot to another. Earl frowned deeply, studying the tracks thoughtfully. The pickup was becoming more than coincidence. It was a lead. "Problem is," Earl muttered, rubbing a rough hand over his silver-streaked hair, "a truck driving around town isn't enough evidence. We need something more concrete." Frank looked uncertainly at his superior, clearly bothered by the lack of progress. Earl's experience and intuition told him this truck was their connection, but without tangible evidence, their hands remained frustratingly tied. With a sigh, Earl turned back toward his cruiser. "Keep watch, Frank. If it's them, they'll slip eventually." That afternoon, rain clouds gathered slowly over Red Maple, bringing with them a hush that settled thickly over the Whitlock farm. Luna felt the air grow cooler and heard the first drops tapping against the windows. Alone in the living room, she approached Shadow again, her small fingers gently reaching out to find his fur. The dog's muscles tightened slightly under her touch, but he did not move away. Encouraged by even this tiny gesture, Luna began softly recounting her favorite story, a tale her father had told her countless times. "Once upon a time," she began quietly, leaning her head closer toward Shadow, "there was a brave knight who had lost everything. His heart was broken, and he wandered the land alone, silent, forgotten." She paused, feeling Shadow's breathing slow beneath her touch. One day, the knight met a little princess who couldn't see, but she could sense his sadness, and it matched her own loneliness. Slowly, they realized they could heal each other. They were never alone again. Luna's voice grew even softer, barely audible above the gentle patter of rain now steadily drumming on the farmhouse roof. Shadow remained still, but Luna felt a faint tremor in his body, a delicate shift that had not been there before. Her heart soared hopefully, though she kept her voice calm and steady. Outside, rain began to fall harder, drenching the earth, forming small puddles that mirrored the gray sky above. Luna continued speaking, words weaving through the rain, creating a tapestry of quiet companionship. Suddenly, Shadow shifted slightly, and Luna paused, holding her breath. With a slow, cautious movement, Shadow lifted his large head, turned slightly, and carefully laid it across Luna's lap. Luna's breath caught in surprise, joy blooming rapidly within her chest. She gently placed her hand atop Shadow's head, fingers stroking his fur tenderly. Tears welled behind her sightless eyes, emotions overflowing quietly into the room around them. The silence between them remained, but now it spoke clearly of understanding and trust. From the kitchen doorway, Cynthia stood frozen, tears silently streaming down her face, witnessing the connection formed by patience and intuition. For the first time, her heart dared to hope Luna might indeed be safe in this unpredictable world. Meanwhile, at the edge of town, Deputy Frank Morris parked his cruiser, studying the rusted pickup parked suspiciously by an abandoned cabin. Inside the cabin, hidden by the darkness, stood a shadowy figure, a man named Daryl, burly and imposing, with cold, calculating eyes. His dark hair was greasy, his face covered by a thick beard. Beside him stood a smaller, wiry companion named Ned, whose nervous mannerisms betrayed constant paranoia. Daryl watched the cruiser through a gap in the wooden shutters, eyes narrowing dangerously. "They're sniffing too close," he growled quietly, his deep voice carrying authority that made Ned flinch slightly. "Maybe we should move again." Ned glanced anxiously outside, rubbing a thin hand nervously across his unshaven jaw. "But the boss said we stay put until everything's set. You know he'll blame us if something goes wrong." Daryl growled in frustration, stepping away from the window. "Then we better make sure nothing does." The rain intensified, falling heavily now across Red Maple, hiding secrets and washing away tracks. But within the warmth of the Whitlock farmhouse, Luna held tightly to Shadow, two silent companions sheltering together from the storms, both literal and unseen, that waited just beyond their quiet world. Autumn had fully embraced Red Maple, painting the small town in hues of burnt orange, golden amber, and deep crimson. Leaves rustled softly underfoot, creating gentle whispers that spoke to Luna Whitlock in a language only she truly understood. Standing at the threshold of the farmhouse's back porch, Luna clutched Shadow's thick leather leash tightly in one small hand. Her heart raced with excitement and nervous anticipation as her parents stood nearby, exchanging hesitant glances filled with both worry and hope. John Whitlock knelt in front of his daughter, his strong hand gently resting on her slender shoulder. "Remember, Luna, stay within the garden fence. Shadow will keep you safe," he reminded softly, his voice reassuring yet tinged with cautious concern. Cynthia hovered anxiously behind him, thin arms crossed protectively, her pale face strained by the battle raging silently within her. Letting go felt both terrifying and necessary, like stepping on a fragile ice. Luna tilted her face upward, her pale blue eyes unseeing yet profoundly expressive. "I promise, Daddy. We'll be careful." Her words held quiet confidence, the blossoming assurance of a child stepping bravely toward independence. "All right, then," John whispered gently, his rugged features softening into a tender smile. "Go ahead, sweetheart." As Luna stepped cautiously onto the grass, Shadow moved silently beside her, his broad frame steady, protective. The garden was small yet vibrant, enclosed by an old wooden fence overgrown with honeysuckle and wild roses. Luna breathed deeply, savoring the sweet fragrance that danced in the crisp, cool air. Each careful step felt profound, a declaration of newfound freedom. As she moved, Luna's heightened senses absorbed the gentle symphony around her, the soft hum of bees, distant chirping of birds, and Shadow's quiet, rhythmic breathing. She carefully measured each stride, her fingers occasionally brushing against flowers, feeling delicate petals beneath her touch. Shadow stayed patiently by her side, calm yet alert, attuned entirely to Luna's presence. Unknown to Luna, they were not alone. Hidden behind a hedge, Tommy Miller crouched, watching carefully through the gaps. At 10, Tommy was a wiry, energetic boy with messy brown hair perpetually sticking out beneath a worn baseball cap. Freckles dotted his sun-kissed face, his bright green eyes filled with curiosity and a mischievous spark. Initially, Tommy had mocked Luna's blindness, calling her odd and fragile, a perspective shaped largely by ignorance and childish fear of the unfamiliar. Yet, secretly fascinated, he found himself drawn back repeatedly, observing her growing bond with the mysterious dog. Tommy's father, Ben Miller, was a local farmer known throughout Red Maple for his stubbornness and integrity. A tall, sturdy man with broad shoulders and calloused hands, Ben had recently refused demands from strangers claiming to offer protection, sensing something deeply suspicious. His resistance had begun attracting unwanted attention, igniting anxiety in his usually carefree son. Today, Tommy squinted suspiciously at Luna, puzzled by her bravery. He watched silently, astonished at how effortlessly she navigated her environment without sight, relying instead on Shadow and her heightened senses. Inside the Whitlock home, Cynthia stood stiffly by the kitchen window, eyes fixed intently on her daughter. She nervously twisted a dish towel between pale fingers, anxiety visibly trembling through her delicate frame. John approached quietly, placing a comforting hand gently upon her tense shoulder. "She'll be all right, Cynthia," he whispered softly. "Trust her and trust Shadow." Cynthia exhaled shakily, nodding once. "I know, John," she admitted quietly, "but it's so hard." Outside, Luna paused suddenly, sensing something beyond her immediate surroundings. Her head tilted slightly toward the hedge, where Tommy froze breathlessly. "Hello," Luna called tentatively, voice gentle yet clear. "Is someone there?" Tommy held his breath, heart pounding rapidly. Shadow's ears perked up, a low, warning growl rumbling from deep within his chest. Luna reached down immediately, soothing him gently with her touch. "Easy, Shadow," she whispered softly. "It's okay." Slowly, Tommy emerged sheepishly from his hiding place, embarrassed yet defiant. "It's just me," he muttered awkwardly, scuffing the toe of his shoe against the ground. Luna smiled faintly, sensing the uncertainty in his voice. "You're Tommy Miller," she stated simply. "I recognize your voice from school." "Yeah," Tommy admitted reluctantly, kicking lightly at fallen leaves. "What's it like?" he blurted suddenly, unable to contain his curiosity. "Not being able to see, I mean." Luna considered his question quietly. "It's different," she said finally, thoughtfully, "but I still see, just differently, like listening to the world instead of looking at it." Tommy hesitated, absorbing her words. "And him?" He nodded cautiously toward Shadow. "Is he your eyes?" "No," Luna corrected softly, her fingers gently caressing Shadow's fur. "He's my friend." Tommy remained quiet for a moment, his previous judgments unraveling slowly. Before he could speak again, voices echoed angrily from the Miller farm down the road. His father's voice rose sharply, defensive and strained. Tommy's face paled instantly, fear flickering across his youthful features. I have to go," he muttered hurriedly, turning swiftly toward home. Luna's heart ached slightly, sensing his sudden distress. "Tommy," she called softly after him, "are you okay?" Tommy hesitated briefly, glancing back with uncertain eyes. "I don't know," he confessed quietly before disappearing hurriedly down the road. At the Miller farm, Ben Miller stood rigidly, confronting two imposing figures, Daryl and Ned, menacing in their stance, eyes cold and calculating. Daryl's powerful build loomed threateningly, his dark, greasy hair and thick beard amplifying his intimidating presence. Ned, smaller and wiry, shuffled nervously behind him, anxious eyes darting around, clearly uncomfortable yet compliant. "We've warned you already," Daryl growled ominously. "Pay up, or face the consequences. Your choice." Ben squared his broad shoulders, his jaw clenched tightly. "I won't bow to criminals," he spat defiantly. "Not now, not ever." Daryl's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Suit yourself," he warned darkly, voice dripping menace. "But remember, you chose this." Meanwhile, back in the Whitlock garden, Luna continued walking slowly, heart still lingering on her interaction with Tommy. He seemed worried. "Shadow," she murmured softly, fingers tangled gently in Shadow's fur. Shadow moved slightly closer, as if sensing her troubled thoughts, quietly supportive. Luna lifted her face toward the soft, cool breeze, inhaling deeply the mingled fragrances of honeysuckle, roses, and fallen leaves. Despite the tension lingering unseen, Luna felt deeply grateful. Today marked an important step toward freedom, and she sensed this was only the beginning. For the first time, she felt not only safe but truly understood, accompanied not just by Shadow, but by newfound courage within herself. As they circled slowly back toward the farmhouse, Shadow's calm presence beside her, Luna realized something profound. She didn't just trust Shadow, she trusted herself. In that gentle realization, something quietly shifted, setting a powerful new foundation beneath her feet, preparing her for whatever lay ahead. Night descended swiftly upon Red Maple, shrouding the town beneath a heavy blanket of darkness. Thick clouds obscured the stars, and a persistent autumn drizzle tapped steadily upon roofs and windows. Luna Whitlock lay curled beneath her patchwork quilt, drifting in and out of sleep as the sound of rain gently lulled her senses. Beside her bed, Shadow lay quietly, his large body curled protectively, breathing deep and steady. It was just past midnight when the tranquility shattered abruptly. Luna jolted awake as Shadow sprang upright, a low, menacing growl vibrating through his powerful chest. Luna's heart thumped wildly as she sat up, alert. She reached instinctively toward Shadow, fingertips brushing the tense muscles along his back. "Shadow," Luna whispered anxiously, her voice trembling slightly. The German shepherd stood stiffly, ears perked forward, eyes narrowed, and fixed intently on the window. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Outside, a sudden crash splintered the silence, followed by muffled voices. Luna felt fear pulse sharply through her veins. Someone was on her property. Her pulse quickened, senses heightened, listening intently as footsteps crunched softly across the gravel driveway, growing louder and closer. In an instant, Shadow launched himself toward the bedroom door, pawing and growling desperately. Luna fumbled quickly to her bedside table, fingers trembling as they closed around the emergency whistle her father had given her, an item she never had cause to use until tonight. "Shadow, wait!" Luna cried softly, but the dog had already shoved through the partly open door, racing down the staircase toward the unknown threat. Luna scrambled from her bed, heart pounding fiercely, and carefully followed him, navigating solely by memory and instinct. Downstairs, John and Cynthia jolted awake at the commotion. John quickly rose, grabbing a flashlight, his rugged features tense with protective urgency. Cynthia clutched her robe anxiously, her thin frame trembling visibly. "John, what's happening?" she whispered fearfully, her voice strained. "Stay here, Cynthia," John replied firmly. "I'll check it out." Outside, Shadow burst through the back door, which swung open wildly, hitting the wall with a loud bang. A startled shout echoed, followed by frantic footsteps scrambling away through the darkness. Shadow pursued fiercely, barking ferociously, but abruptly halted at the garden fence, torn and splintered, the intruders already vanishing into the forest beyond. Panting heavily, Shadow paced along the broken fence line, alert and agitated. Luna reached the open door, shivering from both fear and the cool, damp air. She brought the whistle to her lips and blew sharply, the piercing sound cutting clearly through the night, echoing across the farm. Within minutes, the distant wail of police sirens broke the heavy silence, signaling Sheriff Earl Benson's arrival. Earl stepped from his cruiser swiftly, his imposing figure moving with purpose and authority. He approached quickly, sharp blue eyes assessing the scene, his usually calm face marked by grim determination. "Are you folks all right?" Earl asked urgently, turning his flashlight across the damaged fence and muddy ground littered with chaotic footprints. "We're okay, Sheriff," John replied shakily, embracing Luna protectively. Cynthia hovered nervously nearby, eyes wide with lingering panic. Earl's gaze narrowed further upon the muddy footprints near the Whitlock property line. "Looks like two sets of prints," he muttered thoughtfully. "We'll try to trace them, but the rain might make it difficult." Back in town, Tommy Miller sat upright in his bed, wide awake and trembling. His mind replayed vividly the hushed voices he'd overheard near the old barn deep in the woods. Fear clutched his heart tightly, urging him from beneath the safety of his blankets. He tiptoed carefully to his father's bedroom, knocking softly. "Come in," Ben Miller murmured sleepily, instantly alert as he saw Tommy's frightened face. "What's wrong, son?" "Dad," Tommy whispered anxiously, wringing his small hands together nervously. "There's something you need to know. I've seen men hanging around our barn in the woods. Big men, scary. I heard them arguing tonight, and then a crash came from Luna's place." Ben rose swiftly, his rugged face drawn tight with concern. "Are you sure, Tommy?" he asked firmly. Tommy nodded emphatically, tears welling slightly in his anxious green eyes. "Stay inside," Ben instructed sharply, pulling on his worn jacket and boots. "Lock the doors. I'll tell Sheriff Earl immediately." Tommy nodded shakily, fearfully watching his father hurry out into the rainy night. Back at the Whitlock farm, Sheriff Earl knelt by the broken fence, carefully photographing the muddy footprints for evidence. Deputy Frank Morris stood nearby, nervously clutching a notepad, eyes darting anxiously around the perimeter. "These prints match the size we found near the abandoned cabin," Frank observed, his voice tense with realization. Earl nodded slowly, silently acknowledging the troubling connection. Suddenly, headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the rain-soaked yard. Ben Miller climbed out of his truck, rushing forward urgently, his expression deeply unsettled. "Sheriff, we need to talk," Ben called, approaching rapidly. "My son overheard strangers talking near our barn tonight, same direction your suspects fled." Earl straightened abruptly, eyes sharp with determination. "Let's get there quickly," he ordered, motioning for Deputy Frank. "John, Cynthia, lock up tight. We'll have a deputy patrol nearby until we secure things." As the police and Ben departed hastily, Luna stood quietly, shivering slightly, her small hands still clinging to Shadow's fur. Shadow pressed closely against her, steady and comforting, his warmth calming her racing heart. Cynthia knelt swiftly beside her daughter, gently enfolding Luna within trembling arms. "I was so afraid," Cynthia whispered tearfully, gently brushing damp strands of blonde hair away from Luna's face. "But you were so brave, sweetheart." "I wasn't alone, Mama," Luna replied softly, her voice steady, hand lovingly stroking Shadow's rain-soaked coat. Shadow kept me safe. Inside the farmhouse, John carefully secured doors and windows, his face etched deeply with anxiety, yet pride in Luna's courage. They all moved slowly back inside, the warmth of the kitchen lights chasing shadows away. Meanwhile, in the dense forest near Miller's barn, Sheriff Earl and Deputy Frank moved stealthily through dripping branches and tangled undergrowth, flashlights slicing methodically through darkness. Ben guided them silently, his eyes narrowed fiercely. They reached the barn cautiously, flashlights illuminating the empty interior. Earl's sharp eyes noticed scattered cigarette butts and fresh footprints outside. "They've been here recently," he muttered grimly. "But they're gone now." Frank exhaled anxiously, scribbling hastily in his notebook, fingers shaking. "What now, Sheriff?" "We double patrols and secure every vulnerable property," Earl responded firmly. "And we won't stop until we catch these men." Returning to their homes, each heart weighed heavily with unspoken fears. But at the Whitlock farm, Luna rested quietly once more in bed, Shadow curled protectively at her side. Though fear lingered softly at the edge of sleep, Luna felt deeply safe beside Shadow. Tonight had proven something profound. Shadow had returned fully, fierce and protective, forever bound to her side. In the quiet aftermath, Luna knew her world had shifted permanently, but not toward fear, toward strength, courage, and unbreakable trust, forged clearly in the darkest night. The dawn broke reluctantly over red maple, as if the night clung stubbornly to the edges of the world. Mist curled lazily around the tall maples, mingling with a lingering chill that hinted at the approaching winter. Luna Whitlock rose quietly from her bed, heart thumping steadily in her chest, her mind swirling with a mixture of fear and determination. Beside her, Shadow stirred, his warm, steady breathing comforting yet also reminding her of the dangers she'd faced the previous night. Luna reached out, gently stroking the German shepherd's soft fur, feeling the warmth and strength that lay quietly beneath his gentle exterior. Today she would find answers alone. Careful not to wake her parents, Luna dressed swiftly, pulling on a thick wool sweater, jeans, and sturdy hiking boots. She quietly slipped the whistle, her lifeline from the previous night, securely around her neck. Shadow rose immediately, his keen amber eyes alert, sensing the urgency in her movements. Luna placed her small hand on Shadow's broad shoulder, whispering softly, "We need to go quietly, boy." Outside, the morning air was sharp, cool, and filled with the rich scents of damp earth and fallen leaves. Shadow moved deliberately beside her, his footsteps guiding her path clearly. Luna paused, inhaling deeply, drawing courage from Shadow's unwavering presence. She recalled vividly the distinctive scent lingering from the intruders last night, a heavy, acrid scent of cigarettes and motor oil. Taking a steadying breath, Luna gently urged Shadow forward, her fingers gripping lightly into his thick fur as they crossed carefully over the broken fence line, stepping into the forbidden woods beyond. The forest had always been off-limits, forbidden by Cynthia's anxious warnings and John's firm instructions. Yet now, with every cautious step, Luna felt strangely empowered, her heightened senses capturing the subtle shifts in the environment. The whisper of leaves, the distant trill of a bird, the gentle, rhythmic padding of Shadow's paws upon the leaf-strewn forest floor. They moved silently, steadily forward, deeper into the unknown. Meanwhile, at the Whitlock farmhouse, Cynthia woke suddenly, anxiety jolting through her body as she sensed something amiss. She moved quickly to Luna's room, panic tightening in her chest upon discovering it empty. "John!" she called sharply, her voice shaking, eyes wide with sudden terror. John rushed to her side, swiftly taking in the empty bed. Without a word, he grabbed his heavy jacket, moving purposefully toward the door. "Call Sheriff Earl," he instructed urgently, his voice tightly controlled. "I'll start searching the property." Within the depths of the forest, Luna and Shadow approached an old, abandoned cabin hidden by dense foliage, its wooden frame leaning precariously, worn by time and weather. Shadow halted abruptly, a deep growl rumbling low in his chest, alert and protective. Luna froze instinctively, heart racing sharply. She listened carefully, sensing movement within the cabin. A heavy footstep, muffled voices murmuring angrily. Before she could react, a large, rough hand gripped her arm fiercely, pulling her harshly inside. "Well, look who we have here," growled Daryl, his deep voice menacing. Daryl towered above her, broad-shouldered, his dark, greasy hair disheveled, eyes cold and hard. Ned stood nervously behind him, eyes darting anxiously, clearly afraid of the unfolding situation. Luna's heart hammered wildly, fear choking her breath. Shadow sprang forward instantly, snarling ferociously, teeth bared, attacking Daryl's leg viciously. Daryl howled in pain, releasing Luna, swinging wildly at Shadow. Ned stumbled backward, panic gripping his wiry frame. "Let her go, man. This isn't what we planned," he stammered fearfully. Shadow fought bravely but yelped sharply as Daryl's heavy boot connected brutally with his ribs. The dog staggered briefly, blood trickling from his muzzle, but he lunged again with renewed fury. Luna stumbled backward, collapsing against the wall, disoriented and overwhelmed. Her pulse pounded wildly, ears ringing sharply, panic tightening her chest. Yet amidst her terror, Luna remembered her father's steady, calm voice. When lost or afraid, listen carefully, Luna. Trust the wind, the sounds. They'll guide you home. Breathing deeply, Luna forced herself calm, ears attuned intensely to her surroundings. The scuffling feet, Shadow's fierce snarls, the terrified breathing of Ned nearby. Steadying herself, Luna swiftly raised her emergency whistle to her lips, blowing sharply and clearly, the piercing sound slicing decisively through the dense woods, echoing crisply through the trees. Back in town, Sheriff Earl and Deputy Frank, already en route toward the Whitlock farm, halted instantly, recognizing Luna's signal. Earl barked swift instructions through his radio, face grimly determined. John Whitlock, heart racing, heard the whistle too, plunging urgently into the forest toward his daughter's desperate call. At the cabin, Shadow's strength wavered slightly, body battered and bleeding, yet he stood fiercely between Luna and her attackers. Ned, seeing approaching flashlights through the trees, fled instantly, stumbling frantically into the forest. Daryl, enraged yet injured, lunged desperately once more at Shadow, who held his ground defiantly, fierce loyalty blazing within his eyes. Suddenly, heavy footsteps crashed swiftly into the clearing. Sheriff Earl, gun drawn, and Deputy Frank burst through the doorway, immediately assessing the chaos. "Hands up!" Earl shouted sharply. Daryl hesitated briefly, calculating coldly before shoving violently past Frank, plunging desperately into the forest behind Ned. Earl barked urgently into his radio, dispatching additional officers toward the fleeing suspects, while Frank rushed swiftly toward Luna. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, voice shaking slightly as he knelt protectively beside her. "Shadow," Luna whispered shakily, reaching desperately for her companion. The wounded dog limped slowly toward her, collapsing weakly at her feet, breathing shallow, yet eyes filled with unwavering devotion. Within moments, John Whitlock burst through the door, heart-wrenching at the sight of his daughter trembling beside her injured companion. He embraced Luna fiercely, tears stinging his eyes, whispering hoarsely, "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe now." Sheriff Earl approached quietly, his expression heavy yet relieved. "Ambulance is on the way, for both Luna and Shadow," he reassured quietly. Luna clung tightly to her father, heart aching desperately for Shadow's suffering, yet profoundly grateful they'd both survived. Outside, in the damp woods, Daryl and Ned disappeared into the shadows, momentarily escaping capture, yet leaving evidence that finally exposed their identities unmistakably. Back in the cabin, John gently lifted Luna, holding her protectively close, Shadow carefully cradled by Deputy Frank. As they moved towards safety, Luna felt deeply connected not only to Shadow, but also to herself, stronger, braver, forever changed by this harrowing experience. And though fear lingered, overshadowed by uncertainty, Luna knew she'd stood resolutely at the edge of her world, and had not fallen. She'd risen. The aftermath of the confrontation at the abandoned cabin left Red Maple cloaked in an uneasy silence. The early morning sun struggled to pierce through layers of lingering mist, bathing the town in a soft, melancholy gray. Sheriff Earl Benson and Deputy Frank Morris had tracked down and arrested Daryl, and Ned shortly after Luna's desperate whistle had echoed through the forest. Red Maple could finally breathe easier, but within the Whitlock household, anxiety remained heavy. Shadow had been rushed immediately to Red Maple Veterinary Clinic, an unassuming white brick building nestled near the town's quiet center. Inside the sterile waiting room, Luna sat curled beside her mother, Cynthia, fingers clutching the edge of a worn leather chair. Cynthia's usually anxious face was now etched with exhaustion. Her slender shoulders drooped beneath a heavy wool shawl, auburn hair disheveled from a sleepless night. Beside them, John stood quietly, strong and steadfast, yet his rugged face betrayed deep worry. After what felt like endless hours, a gentle voice called out softly. Dr. Elizabeth Warren stepped forward into the waiting room. Elizabeth was a woman in her late 40s, with kind, gentle eyes behind stylish black-framed glasses. Her short, dark hair framed her calm, comforting face, radiating a warmth that instantly eased anxious hearts. Known throughout Red Maple for her exceptional skill and compassion, Elizabeth often comforted both animal and owner alike. "Luna," she began softly, kneeling before the young girl. "Shadow is stable now, but his injuries were severe. The impact has damaged nerves in his spine, and there's a chance he might not walk again." Luna's heart twisted painfully, tears silently streaming down her pale cheeks. "Can I see him?" she whispered shakily, her small voice heavy with raw emotion. "Of course," Elizabeth responded gently, guiding Luna carefully toward the recovery room, her warm hand steady upon Luna's shoulder. Inside the dimly lit room, Shadow lay still upon a soft mat, breathing shallow but steady. Luna knelt slowly beside him, fingers trembling slightly as she traced the familiar contours of his gentle face. Shadow stirred slightly, eyes opening halfway, their amber depths soft with recognition. Luna leaned closer, whispering softly into his ear, her voice firm despite its quiet tremble. "Even if you never run again, Shadow, you're still my eyes. You're still my hero." Shadow exhaled gently, laying his head softly against her small hand, a silent, unspoken promise passing between them. Days turned into weeks, and news spread quickly through Red Maple about Luna's courage and Shadow's heroism. At the Miller household, young Tommy had grown quiet and thoughtful since the night of the attack, guilt tugging persistently at his youthful heart. He wrestled daily with memories of his earlier unkindness toward Luna, haunted by her bravery and kindness despite his harsh words. His father, Ben Miller, noticed the change immediately. Tommy was less playful, more introspective, a deeper maturity emerging. One afternoon, Ben approached his son carefully, placing a steady hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You've been awfully quiet lately, son," Ben observed gently. "Anything on your mind?" Tommy hesitated briefly, eyes fixed nervously on his shoes. I think we should visit Luna," he confessed quietly. "I wasn't nice before, Dad. She helped save us all, even though I didn't deserve it." Ben's eyes softened, pride and understanding evident. "I think that's a very good idea," he said warmly. That evening, Tommy and his father arrived at the Whitlock home, Tommy holding a small bouquet of wildflowers gathered carefully from their farm. Luna sat quietly on the porch steps, fingers gently stroking Shadow's head, now resting beside her in a specialized wheelchair provided by Dr. Warren. The dog's alert eyes followed every sound attentively, vigilant as always. Tommy approached slowly, shifting anxiously, his usually energetic demeanor subdued by remorse. "Luna," he began softly, voice hesitant but sincere, "I'm really sorry for how I treated you before. You were so brave, and Shadow was too. You didn't deserve how mean I was." Luna smiled gently, her expression open and forgiving. "It's okay, Tommy. Thank you for coming here." Tommy's nervousness melted into relief, and he extended the flowers shyly. "These are for you and Shadow," he added quietly. John and Cynthia watched silently from the doorway, hearts full as their daughter accepted Tommy's gesture gracefully. Cynthia leaned into John, murmuring softly, "She's grown so much stronger." As days continued, Shadow's condition improved gradually through intensive physical therapy. Dr. Warren patiently guided Luna, teaching her to assist Shadow through simple, strengthening exercises. Luna quickly became adept, confidently guiding Shadow's movements with her intuitive touch and calm, reassuring presence. Inspired by their progress, Dr. Warren suggested an idea: training Luna and Shadow as guides for others. The thought intrigued Luna deeply, igniting a sense of purpose she'd never imagined before. Her parents, initially cautious, soon supported the endeavor, recognizing how deeply Luna and Shadow thrived in their new roles. Months passed swiftly, and the transformation within Luna, Shadow, and even Red Maple itself was palpable. Luna's confidence blossomed steadily as she and Shadow became inseparable partners, each guided wholly by trust and instinct. Tommy frequently visited, becoming an enthusiastic helper and loyal friend, his early unkindness replaced entirely by admiration and affection. On one sunny spring afternoon, Luna and Shadow stood proudly at the town's small senior center, ready to lead their first guided nature walk for Red Maple's elderly residents. The seniors, eager and warmly supportive, gathered curiously around the pair, fascinated by their unusual yet perfectly harmonious bond. Mary Jenkins, an elderly woman with twinkling blue eyes, silver hair twisted into a neat bun, approached gently. "We trust you both entirely," she declared warmly, her soft, weathered hand lightly touching Luna's arm. "Show us your world." Luna smiled brightly, her face radiant, Shadow standing steady beside her, attentive and dignified. Together, they led the group carefully along winding paths, Luna's heightened senses vividly describing every rustle of leaves, fragrance of blooming flowers, and distant songs of birds. Shadow's quiet presence reassured and steadied her every step, guiding her confidently along the path. At the walk's conclusion, the seniors applauded warmly, their faces filled with gratitude and awe. Sheriff Earl, watching quietly from nearby, nodded approvingly, his normally stoic face touched by genuine admiration. As Luna and Shadow stood together beneath the gentle sunlight, she softly murmured to him, "See, Shadow? We don't need eyes to show them the beauty around us." Shadow responded gently, leaning warmly against Luna's side, forever united as guides not just through physical paths, but through the unseen journeys of courage and trust. Red Maple had forever changed. Luna and Shadow had transformed not only themselves, but the hearts of everyone they touched. Together, they'd taught an invaluable lesson, that sight is not defined by vision alone, and true guidance often comes from the strength of the heart. The story of Luna and Shadow reminds us all of an important truth we often overlook, that seeing isn't always about sight. Sometimes, true vision comes from trust, courage, and the willingness to rely on your heart. In our own lives, let's remember to see beyond appearances, to guide each other gently, and to have faith even when the path ahead is unclear. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone you love. Comment amen below to spread hope, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this. May God bless you and your family always. Amen.